Hi, everyone, and welcome to Margin for Error, where we get to talk with founders, investors, and ecosystem builders. I'm thrilled to have with us Joe Phillips and Will Corbera, co-founders of Payabli, a payments infrastructure solution built for software companies. If you've ever wrestled with integrating payments, making payouts, or streamlining payment operations in your product, this conversation will be packed with insight. Joe and Will, thanks for joining us. It's exciting to have you both here.
Thanks, Ed. It's an honor to be here. We're really excited to talk with you today.
Thank you, Ed. Excited to have a conversation.
Absolutely. So let's get started from the beginning. What were you doing before Payabli, and how did your own paths cross to build this startup together?
Well, Ed, this is always a great question to start with. I think we probably have recounted our origin story 10,000 times, if not more by now. And I think it gives us a lot of credence and kind of affirmation in why we're building what we're building at Payabli. So we're excited to share with you our story. Will, why don't you start with your background as a payments entrepreneur?
Sure. Ed, I've been very fortunate to be in the space for close to 25 years now. Prior to Payabli, I co-founded a payments platform with my brother where we didn't know at the time, but we were one of the pioneers for digitization of property payments. So paying your rent online with a card, ACH, or paying your condo fees or HOA fees online. We grew that business, bootstrapped it for about 16, 17 years. One of the first payfacs in the industry, and we're very blessed to have had a successful exit in 2017. And during that journey, Joe and I have been dear friends for many, many years, and he tells the story better than I do, but ultimately it led to the genesis of what today is Payabli and shed some light at some pain points the industry had. So we endeavored to build this modern infrastructure stack for software platforms.
So I always joke that Will was a Miami fintech entrepreneur before it was cool to be a Miami fintech entrepreneur. And our the way we met was as a trip. We met 15 years ago at a salsa club in Miami, and we've been close buddies ever since. And I had a front row seat to watching Will build RevoPay and saw his kind of meteoric rise there from very early days to ultimately an exit. That whole journey, him and I have been very close, and the bond was entrepreneurship, right? And I admired him for building Revo. At that time, I was scaling one of the first online food ordering platforms called seamless.com. And he was always like, man, you have entrepreneurship in your DNA. Sales is the engine of commerce. That's what every startup needs. Like, you got to go start your own business. It took me a little while to get started, but ultimately the journey led me to work for another startup. I was an early executive at a company called Service B2B SaaS for contractors. And when I was at Service, that was basically the origin story of Payabli. I was scaling their sales organization. Post our Series B, we were looking for ways to grow revenue outside of me just hiring more and more salespeople. And the team started seeing these trends where we were having a lot of issues with our payment processor. We had a legacy provider. It's a very disconnected integration. They were not treating our customers at the same customer experience standards that we had for ourselves. And at the same time, we weren't monetizing it well. We really didn't know any better, but we were processing a lot of volume at the time, billions of dollars of volume, and we weren't really unlocking the revenue potential there. And we just really didn't know otherwise, but we knew that we had a problem with our payment processing. Long story short, I brought Will in to advise our head of growth on our payment strategy. And ultimately, he helped architect what is today's ServiceTitan payments that really became kind of the modern case study on a vertical SaaS platform, basically embedding financial services products in their platform and providing a much better customer experience and unlocking meaningful revenue out of that. Today, that's, $60 billion in total processing volume each year and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And, that was basically the impetus for us to go build out Payabli. It worked really well there. We saw other companies like Mindbody and Toast and others doing something similar, but they were having to build everything from the ground up. And we thought, let's build out kind of modern stack that would help software companies accelerate the timeline of doing this in a much, much more frictionless way.
I'm going to get a little bit more into Payabli, but as both of you guys have already kind of shared, this isn't your first time to the startup rodeo. And before you both decided, let's do this, let's build Payabli together, in retrospect or in hindsight, what did you guys think about doing differently for kind of your second, your third startups? what mistakes did you guys both of you guys were actively like avoiding? Like, we're not going to do this again. We've done our, past startups, we've learned from it. These are just some of the things that we would do kind of differently this time. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind for you both? Maybe Joe, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. It's like, I don't think we oriented ourselves with that. Hey, like if we have a chance to do it again, this is how you want to do it. I think for me at least, I think there were a couple things, right? Number one is I knew I wanted to start a business. I come from an entrepreneurial family. I've worked for incredible entrepreneurs like Jason Finger at seamlessweb.com, like Aaron Vahe at Service, and I was inspired by them. I knew that ultimately, if I look back on my career when I was retired and didn't go for it, then I would be disappointing myself. At the same time, I had this amazing cheerleader and buddy, Will, who was the ideal partner for me, right? I think we see the world very similarly from a value standpoint, and we have very complementary skill sets. And I said, hey, here's an opportunity to work with someone who I really admire, who I think would be the optimal co-founder. We have this business idea that we've seen, like we validated it at Service, and we think there's a big market with a big need here. Let's go out and have a shot at it, right? And I think the one thing that is a little bit ironic is Will had bootstrapped his entire first venture, and literally like the PB&J top ramen entrepreneur, that was Will. I came from two companies that had meteoric growth and had taken on substantial capital, especially which has gone on to raise over $1 billion in capital. And we kind of pivoted. So we started the business saying we're going to bootstrap. We want to have control of our destiny. We don't want to be, at the mercy of investors. Like, we want to build this kind of small giant in similar fashion to how Will built out Revo. I think as we continue to scale and get conviction in the business and see that we were able to acquire customers and people wanted what we were building, we ultimately did raise venture capital, and we've now gone on to raise $60 million in VC funding, and we have some incredible investors. But I think our minds shifted. I think with Will, is like he didn't have the experience raising capital and learned it. I had been part of companies that did, and I thought we were going to bootstrap forever. And while I'm very grateful for that first couple of years that we bootstrapped, and it was definitely, I think, made us better as a company, I found that for us, the right decision was raising the seed round with our early investors and the whole journey that we've done fundraising since.
Got it.
I think for me, the way that I framed it, if I go back into my memory bank, is what did I want to do with Joe, right? What did we want to be intentional about? When we were first starting my previous company, my brother, we were very opportunistic in terms of, hey, we stumbled upon payments and we figured out a way to be successful and build something great in the space. And we stumbled upon pioneering digitization of property payments, right? We learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes. We figured things out as we went, but it was a really incredible training ground for us to say, okay, what we had built plus what we were observing at Service, there's got to be a better way to unify the fragmented pieces that exist in the payment space. And we want to make sure that we could unify all these disparate solutions that are out there when it comes to underwriting, risk monitoring, when it comes to pay-ins or payouts, right? Getting paid by a customer or paying a supplier or vendor. How do we unify all that to make it very easy for these software platforms to embed and monetize payments? So that was very intentional from the very beginning, right? And we were very clear of the problem that we wanted to solve, and by becoming that infrastructure for these SaaS platforms to embed and monetize payments. The other thing that we knew we did want to do, and we were intentional about it from the start, is culture. I think what I learned a lot, and Joe certainly did in his experience, is how important culture is, right? It was an incredible 17-year journey for me to learn how culture is incredibly important and being about it, not just talking about it, right? So I think being able to transcend that into Payabli has reaped tremendous rewards for the company because people love working at Payabli, right? And Joe and I are very proud about that. And it's extraordinarily hard to nurture and cultivate a great culture. We know that would be critical for us to build something lasting and folks wanting to look forward to Mondays.
I think that's great. It sounds like a lot of, things that you guys were drawing on some of your past experiences, whether it be, how we approach fundraising, making sure that we're kind of aligned against that and those experiences that we had. I think, Will, you just touched upon the cultural element, kind of thinking about, what type of place do I want to not just work in, but build in, kind of leveraging your own experience, but also, kind of tapping into Joe's experience at, some of these large kind of mega startups as well. So I think there's a few things that I think that you guys really touched upon that was really interesting. But I wanted to kind of go back to now Payabli, and Joe and Will, I know you guys both shared just a little bit about what it is that you do, but I'd love to hear just kind of in your words, what is Payabli?
Yeah, the fancy way to describe it is we're a payment infrastructure for software companies to quickly and easily embed and monetize payments. If you take a step back, like if I was explaining it to my mom or my grandmother, for example, it's we as consumers or businesses interact with other businesses on a day-to-day basis. You get your plumbing, your toilet fixed or your HVAC repaired. You pay for your gym dues, you pay your rent or your HOA dues online, right? All those businesses generally are using, at this point, are using an operating software, right? They're a vertical SaaS platform. A software as a service that's specific, it's purpose built for that industry, right? That knows and understands the needs of the merchants, the businesses in the industry. I, as the business owner, want to run my entire business in that software. So when I go to send you an invoice, if I'm, doing your plumbing, or if I'm a gym owner and I'm charging your monthly dues or collecting rent, if I'm a property manager, I'm doing it in that software. Payabli is providing the embedded technology to facilitate those transactions. And then all the operational aspects from the onboarding, the underwriting of those merchants, all the reporting to understand kind of the transaction go through. Did it settle in the bank account? We're packaging all that up seamlessly so that it's a very frictionless and easy, seamless experience within the software. At the same time, not only are we delighting the end user with that experience, but we're unlocking or providing a new revenue opportunity because we partner with that software company. We say, hey, you're the distribution. You have access to all these merchants. You have these features that you need to facilitate payments for, whether it's invoicing, whether it's a virtual terminal, whether it's an auto pay. Let us basically power those experiences with our technology. We'll abstract all the technical difficulty and all the regulatory complexity around it. And then we'll give you revenue for those transactions that we're processing, right? So it's unlocking basically new revenue for the software company as well.
And I think that touches just a little bit upon kind of the next question that I have, because it's really in part about access. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about Payabli is that it is, I think the phrase that you guys use is democratizing embedded payments. I'm curious, maybe this is a question for Will, like what does that really mean to you? What does it mean to democratize embedded payments in this space?
Yeah, so if you're a payment geek like myself, right, you get excited about the complexities, the barriers, the uphill battle on how to stitch everything together. But it's extraordinarily hard for a software company out the gate to really understand what's step one to be able to embed payments and monetize that so they could have a really seamless, beautiful integrated experience for their customers, right? Because these software companies definitely understand that we're educating them on how payments can be a really big part of their business model. And so what we've done, right, if you're a software platform entering the space today, there's all these legacy fragmented solutions to get set up, right? If I want to offer payment solutions on behalf of merchants accepting payments from customers, how do I stitch together a credit card or debit cards with ACH, with bill pay, with lockbox services, remote deposit capture? Are they going to have to go and stitch that all together, or do they come to one place and select what they want to immediately embed within their ecosystem, their experience? Same thing with payouts, right? If for every pay-in use case, there's a payout use case. And if you are in the property management business and you're collecting rent from renters, well, there's equally amount of volumes that now have to go out to suppliers and vendors, right? The utility companies, the security companies on site, the landscaping company, et cetera, right? And so how do we then allow them to seamlessly facilitate that money movement out to vendors and even workforce, like team members that have to be paid in those merchants? So we've also kind of taken a step further with the payoffs. Same problem. There's all these fragmented solutions. You have individual providers out there providing underwriting capabilities or risk monitoring or pricing and billing engines. Well, we can't really expect the software company to go out and do all that, especially if they're a smaller software company. They don't know where to begin. They have to figure that out. So what we've done is we've unified that, we democratize it, we make it easy for them to get stood up and take control of that experience without having to manage all that operational expertise, right? And so we'll help them with the boarding, the underwriting, the risk management, the recon, depending on where they are in that crawl, walk, run phase, right? If we have a sophisticated partner that wants to take on those efforts, they could use our solutions and take control, or we can manage it on their behalf, right? So we really meet them where they are in that journey, and ultimately we help them with the monetization, of those merchants that it might be turned on, but how do we help them start to monetize the payments and help and create that better experience for the merchants?
You had actually touched upon something, Will, about the legacy players. And a lot of these embedded payment tools really focus on building for scale. One of the advantages that, that your team has is around a degree of flexibility. So, when you guys think about balancing scale and flexibility, and when you think about how do you ensure Payabli platform works for companies with different volumes, different risk profiles, well, I think you mentioned that, different compliance needs, like how do you create that balance?
Yeah, great question. We've been very intentional from the start to focus on what we call the need to pay verticals. So we've tackled complex, sophisticated verticals with specific requirements around multi-party transactions or complex fee structures, industry-specific compliance, etc. And when we think about building and maintaining that flexibility, every time we build something, we talk about taking the barbell approach, right? The barbell, we're API first, right? That's the barbell. But then on one end of the barbell, we have embedded components. On the other end of the barbell, we've got our web application, and then we have AI built in or infused with different agents that are helping our partners leverage those as we go, and that's a big endeavor that we've been investing in over the years. So it maintains that flexibility depending on where they are and their size and flexibility. We often have partners that want to mix and match embedded components with APIs, or some want to SSO into the web application, and our web application is fully brandable, theme. They can theme it. It feels like it's theirs, right? We want to be invisible infrastructure for them. So we've had partners who want to get set up and running as little up and running as little as a couple weeks, right? But depending on where we meet them as to where they are, and so a big part of it is also by unifying the 3Ps, the pay and payout payops, we intentionally eliminate all that vendor fragmentation. And so it really removes a lot of complexity. It removes different contractings, different reporting, disconnected experiences. And so that really, really helps where we can have that flexibility, right? But at the same time, make it really easy for them to get up and running.
Got it. Got it. So really kind of a lot of it is also the tech stack, but how you're starting to think about these different use cases that kind of really kind of fits need to purpose, if you will. But, and so it kind of makes me wonder, and again, if you kind of go from kind of the earlier days of the company, and maybe this is a question for Joe. I mean, like, what was one assumption about your ideal customer that has kind of changed after launch, kind of like hearing what Will has just said about these different use cases and what have you? And how did that kind of reshape your go-to-market or even your onboarding strategy as you start to think about kind of that ideal customer and what do they really need? What's the real pain point that you guys are really solving for them?
It's a great question. I think off the top of my head, historically, what we've seen, we haven't veered too far away from our ideal customer. We had the need to pay verticals. So there's about 9 verticals that there's an ongoing relationship with the payer and the merchant and the vendor, right? So think property management, think government, utility, education, healthcare, and some other insurance and others, right? Where they're very low risk. There's some foundational aspects about the cost structure that make them better, higher margin verticals to support our partners. They're less price sensitive, and we can build differentiation by addressing some of those more complex needs and use cases that Will talked about, right? So we haven't really veered away from that, and if anything, we've stayed focused on that. Now, from time to time, we'll be opportunistic, and we have been opportunistic, and I think when we've done that, sometimes it's worked out in our favor, and more often than not, we're like, we should have stayed with our core ICP, like most organizations do. But as you know, Ed, as a startup aficionado, you kind of do what you have to do, especially in the early days, to kind of get customers testing out the technology and generating revenue. I do think one thing that has changed from early on, and I've actually been having a lot of meetings about this just today, is that every software company that starts thinking about embedded payments, they want the success that a ServiceTitan or a MindBody or a Toast has had in generating 20, 30, 50, maybe 70% of their revenues off of fintech programs like payments. I think what we assumed and what they assumed is like, if we build it, they will come, right? There was kind of that mentality where, hey, all we have to do is integrate, and then it'll be that the hard part will be over. And what we found is that's the journey just starts after the integration. Once you go live, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to drive adoption of the technology and get people processing the volume. And so we're starting to shift a lot of our mind share and our programs around how do we help our partners become more successful, whether that's us doing some of that work, selling into their merchant base, us partnering with strategic consultants that have a lot of experience as fractional heads of payments or fintech directors for them and embedding them within their base. So that's an aspect that has definitely changed, and we're seeing a lot of demand from our partners on that.
I mean, I love the fact that, one, obviously the adaptation, right? Kind of really trying to not just build it and let them kind of run with it, but trying to really invest in their success and helping them to see the impact. But I'm also a big fan of niching, right? I love the fact that you said you had your original ICP and you stuck with it. I mean, yes, maybe some opportunities, but really staying kind of focused to who you're trying to serve today. And then as new opportunities may come along, you guys will be, going to kind of scrutinize what's the next one. But I love that element to it. Speaking about kind of this adaptation and just kind of helping them, your customers, seeing the impact of this, what was kind of the trigger? What was that moment when you guys started to say, hey, listen, it's time for us to also take this next step and not just build them some of this infrastructure, but also help them to start to see some of that early success. And the other part of it is, the other side of this is that before they signed up with you guys, before they started to work with you, I have to imagine that conversation is like, well, I don't know when we're going to see the impact. How do you have that kind of difficult conversation that every startup has in trying to show the impact that they will have on a customer or a customer's business?
It's a good question, right? I think in the very earliest days, right, you're starting from nothing. You have 0 customers, right? So I think you have to speak to your track record, right? We told the story of Will building out Revo and becoming one of the first PayFacs. We have a payment expert here that's done it before. And then he helped us build it out at ServiceTitan, which has become kind of the case study, right? So you use that kind of validation, what you've done, and saying, this is what we're trying to do here. And then at that juncture, you're really getting kind of those first believers. They're buying you as the founders, right? There's really 0 track record in terms of the current, endeavor until you start getting them. Then you latch onto those folks. There's always going to be those believers that took a chance on you, and could think of a few in the early days that really, without them, Payabli would not be here. And then you latch onto them and you try and make them as successful as possible, right? That whole adage of like, do things that don't scale. Right. You do that in scores in the early days. The good thing is like, once you found product market fit, it's all optimizations from there. So this whole thing about driving adoption, we didn't have to do much work. Our partners are it's in the data, and our partners are telling us, hey, like, how can we generate more revenue? We're happy at this, but we're kind of at this plateau. How can we take it to the next level? What we found is, as we've scaled, right, we kind of had this good fortune where in the early days, like I said, you get in where you fit in. And we've had, we have today, close to 100 partners, many tens of thousands of merchants processing with us. Those early partners were great validation because they're testing the technology, they're giving us feedback. Some of them did not do much or fizzled out, right? Others kind of had this organic growth and now they're doing very meaningful volume. But as we've been able to mature as an organization, take on more funding, fine our sales motion, we're now getting bigger and more sophisticated partners that are further along in their journey, and they do have the resources to staff that full-time payments team. And they have goals from their investors or from their management team that says, hey, we are making this a priority. So things have changed a little bit, and we're being fortunate that we're being able to sell into those folks that have kind of this as a mandate. But yeah, that's kind of how we thought about it in the past.
So along those lines, and I'd love to get both of your kind of advice, having brought Payabli to this point. But infrastructure often means longer sales cycles, complex kind of value conversations. And I'm thinking of a handful of enterprise B2B SaaS companies, AI definitely, in terms of, that are definitely selling into businesses and enterprise in particular. What advice would you give to founders who are in that kind of more complex value conversations situations? What lessons did both of you learn in terms of how did you navigate that, and what was, ways that you found some success in navigating that process?
I have thoughts, but I don't know if you want to take that and I can back you up, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think I have a few thoughts, right? Relationships really matter, and that's number one. And authentic relationships that you build with the potential prospect, where they understand that you really have their best interest in mind and that you are a student of the business that they're constructing, right? Because once you speak their language and you understand what they're trying to accomplish, and that comes through a lot of discovery, a lot of curiosity, asking a lot of questions, right? You start to understand what problems they're encountering and how your technology could potentially fix that. But they're also giving you tips along the way on how you should continue to build out your technology and that infrastructure stack that we're consistently improving on, right? I think that the trick is, how do you bridge that feedback that you get from prospects and large enterprises to your vision that you're steadfast on and that you want to accomplish, and you know that there's or at least you have a thesis, right, that you think that can really change the industry, right, in this new category. I think that's where it's there's no finish line there, right? How do you consistently bridge all those inputs from prospects, from what's out there in the marketplace, pain points that the customer's telling you, and not and bridge it to that it's scalable, but also applicable to other clients, right? We often talk about, we don't customize any of our technology, but we do build very robust configurations that allow partners to take advantage of the framework that we build.
Out of curiosity, how do you, as the company has continued to grow, how has, you know, how do you continue to maintain, getting customer feedback? I mean, in the early days when you have maybe one, maybe two customers, you're always talking with them. You're always, they're always giving you feedback of what's working, what's definitely not working. But as you continue to grow and as your customer base continues to increase, how do we make sure that you kind of stay connected to make sure that you're still hearing from not just existing customers, but from the market in terms of what they need?
It's not easy, right? But we are very intentional about our partners connecting with us. We created a private Slack channel with them, and they're constantly giving us feedback. We're assessing that feedback. We're reaching out to them, we're meeting with them on a consistent basis. We talk about, how do we scale customer love? Some folks think it's impossible, right? We work really hard to make that partner of ours that started off with us at a certain size, and as they've grown, how do we continue to scale that love and get that feedback loop from them? So I think we're intentional. We have some frameworks that we incorporate to consistently get that customer feedback. And as things pop up, is just running to the fire. There's a key value, listening to them, and prioritizing that feedback. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
If I could tackle both those questions, and you kind of beat me to the punch there. But in terms of like selling into more difficult, longer kind of sales cycles or complex deals, right? I think a lot of it is framing. And, Will just mentioned one of our core values, which is running to the fire. Cost masochistic, but like the more complex, the harder to break into the industry, the more regulated. We actually like that, because while there's a lot of upfront work to be done, once you're in there, by default, you've built in a moat, right? You have defensibility because other people are going to want the path of least resistance. So the more you can kind of frame that problem as like an advantage, as an asset, and like if you're pitching investors and they have questions about that, like I think there's a way of construing it as this is actually beneficial to our business, because it'll take us a couple of years to get in, but then once we get in, no one's unseating us, right? So that's the first thing. And then there's another point I wanted to make, like over-indexing on education. right? Like we get a lot of feedback from prospects that like, you guys are educating us so much in the sales process. You guys are asking us questions that no one else is asking us. And I think the reason why I say that is because like when you educate the partner, you're now adding, even if they don't end up buying from you immediately, you will make an impression. You are basically establishing yourself as credible, as an expert. And like when you're selling to, like we're selling a highly technical product to usually technical founders or CTOs or VPs of product that know their stuff. And a lot of them come in with preconceived notions about embedded payments. And the more that we can strategically ask them questions and inform them about our point of view on the market and where it's going, the more we kind of establish ourselves as pros and we differentiate ourselves. So that's how I would encourage founders to think about selling into those more complex markets. The other one about customer feedback and consistently soliciting that, it's super difficult, right? I'd be lying if I said we had it dialed in. There's a lot of, I think what we're trying to do is infuse it through every step of the process. So in our discovery calls, we're asking those guided discoveries in terms of asking questions that are going to elicit that response of, tell me more about that question. Like, why are you asking me that question? But we're also actively listening and trying to understand what their vertical needs are. We're trying to do that throughout the entire customer journey. Post customer go live, we're doing webinars on a quarterly basis to update them on where our product's going, but also solicit feedback from them. We're trying to set up a customer advisory board as we speak. So next year we'll be launching a customer advisory board to get key customers to come give us feedback on a regular basis, and we'll rotate out. So those are some of the things we're trying right now, but it's a journey for sure.
I mean, it sounds like you guys are really building a really unique relationship with your customers. So I've got to ask, is there a customer success that really kind of stands out for either of you? You know, where you feel like, hey, listen, Payabli has really made a material difference in their operations about, revenue, reducing friction. I'd love to hear a success story that is kind of top of mind for either of you.
Well, anyone that comes, I have one that comes to mind, but anyone you want to showcase?
I think, I mean, there's a broad spectrum of them, right? There's those customers that really believed in you in the very beginning, and they're near and dear to you in a very special place, right? And they're great success stories because at the end of the day, what's unique about what we do, Ed, is every partner that we bring on, we're helping them generate revenue, right? Like that is our model. We are not trying, by working with Payabli, we are increasing the revenues. We are making them more profits. So from day one, that is our entire foundation of existence. Is how do we build the infrastructure and solutions so that they don't have to go out and do everything that we do, right? But they could just plug into our APIs, plug into our embedded components, and immediately start monetizing payments. And that's foundationally, that's cool because our conversations are about how do we work together to make you more money, right? And like Joe said, we're very educational. I think some of our very first partners in the property management space that have supported us and have very complex needs, I think those are the ones that are, there's a few there that come to mind that have become incredible success stories where they're processing uh, tens of millions of dollars a month to hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And that is very exciting, right? Where we've been able to see their trajectory and they're not stopping, right? And being able to be part of that growth story there for them and their investors and what payments is doing for their business, you start to have this cascading of ROI to their business, right? So I'm not sure if you want us to share any names, but
yeah. No, I'll tell us more specific. I'll anonymize it just since we don't have permission. But like we had a very well established provider in the multifamily property management vertical that like they knew that payments was a core part of their business model from early on, and they actually went down the path of becoming a full-fledged payment facilitator. And they built that whole organization from the ground up and managed it for 2-3 years. And then they're like, man, this is a huge operational burden. And they came to us late last year, around this time last year, frankly. And they're like, hey, we hear you guys' technology is awesome. We want to decommission our PayFac. We don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. we believe in the the revenue generating aspects of embedded payments. We just don't want to necessarily run everything soup to nuts. We need a provider like you. And literally within a month, we got them completely decommissioned off of those rails. We migrated all their merchants and all their tokens over. And by January 1st, they were processing with us. Like December 1st to January 1st, they were processing with us. They completely shut down that PayFac business. They're saving themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and a bunch of operational headache. And they're generating more revenue now with us as a managed provider, right? So that's just one. And there's many use cases from our government providers to field services. We got a lot of field services platforms that are using us. So across every vertical, we've got instances like that.
That's awesome. So that's an amazingly fast turnaround. They went like, listen, once we heard, once they started to talk with you just to get them off their kind of the legacy and now moving on to you guys. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's for us, it's very easy. I shouldn't say it's very easy, but for a motivated party to integrate to Payabli and go live, it could be done in a handful of weeks, right? Depending on the complexity of the integration, how full-fledged, how much of our out-of-the-box stuff you want to use versus just the APIs, that all influences it. But over the summer, we had another provider that came from us from Stripe, similar situation where they wanted to get going quickly in anticipation of a big Q4, and we literally migrated them in less than a month. All their 1,800 merchants over, and they're crushing it with us now. So we've got a really formulaic process. We have an amazing solutions engineering team that's really built out a methodical kind of proven process. It's really on the ISV, the vertical SaaS platform, making it a priority and allocating the resources to get the integration done. But in terms of integrating to our technology, it's very easy.
That's awesome. I mean, if we were to shift gear just a little bit and we talk about some of the successes, let's talk about kind of some of the lessons learned from this journey that both of you have been on. I'm going to assume that you have both had some assumptions that you guys were making as you were initially building Payabli. What were some where like, whoa, we were so off on that. That was completely off. And how did you learn from that? And, what were some of the things that you kind of changed, through the journey, just from some of the kind of either we'll call them the misassumptions or we'll call them like kind of lessons learned. But, what were some of those things that you guys experienced yourselves and how did you kind of both manage that and what changes did you end up making?
It's a good question. Will anything come to mind? I have a few.
I think Joe touched upon one of those, right, already, which is if you build it, they will come. Certainly not necessarily the case always, right? We continue to hold our partners and in lockstep and work with them so that they can increase the adoption of digital payments across their established merchant base, right? I think that's a really big one, right? Where you might have a partner that has 1,000 merchants. They may not have penetrated all of them to accept the integrated payment experience because they might be using various payment providers or disintegrated solutions. How do you continue to help them and educate their installed merchant base to use the embedded experience? And I think that's where we definitely have made improvements and investments to really align ourselves with that partner so that they can increase the adoption of payment services across all of their installed merchant base. The other one is continue that we've got a very robust API set and toolkit. How do we continue to educate, create journeys, create integration maps so that it becomes easier and easier for our developer partners to decision more easy and quickly on what might be best for them. So we can't just create this large library of solutions. We have to guide them with our documentation and with training and education as to, hey, what are you trying to solve? How can we best guide you with the proper solution so that you're not out there building a bunch of integrations to our API, but maybe this is the right path. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to make it easier and easier and synthesize that for our partners because we have this robust stack.
I'll take it from like a slightly different angle, Ed, and like what did we remain steadfast on that you could argue was questionable at the time that ultimately ended up I think being the right choice. And from early on, we had this 3P vision: pay in, pay out, pay ops. And I think especially as we bootstrapped for the first 2 years, that was a very audacious goal. You could call us very naive at the time for thinking that, we had any business doing it, but we said we sought out to do that. We saw that as the big opportunity in the space and something that would really distinguish ourselves in the market. And early, especially when we went out to raise, we get some feedback from investors like, why not focus on one? And what about this provider? They do that extremely well. And you start as a founder, especially in the early days, kind of questioning that conviction, and you can be negatively influenced to pivot. And I think you have to be very careful to filter out like the good feedback, or retain the good feedback and just filter out the stuff that's going to be a distraction to your vision. Because with a relatively small team, we've built out a massive, robust 3P platform, right? And I do think that's why we're winning a lot of business today. We do both pay in and pay out exceptionally well. There's a lot of synergies with the payouts piece that benefits. On one boarding app, you can get boarded for payment acceptance as well as embedded payables with us. Something very unique to what we do. So I think just like sticking to our guns there and not doubting ourselves. There were certainly moments where we looked at ourselves and like, hey, is this the right path? And we stood steadfast there, and it was the right choice. The one area that I think we were, probably proven wrong on, and we pivoted quickly, so it wasn't a big deal. But I think from my time at ServiceTitan and just the way that like go-to-market teams have been orchestrated or organized over the last decade, right, is like we were going to do the SDR AE model in early days. We built out an SDR team, a small SDR team, but we found early on that like that model really doesn't work for our type of sale, right? Like you need credible experts that are going to be able to speak to very sophisticated buyers, educate them, run a full cycle, build consensus across multiple different stakeholders in an organization. And for an SDR to bang out a bunch of calls or shoot a bunch of emails to these prospects and think you're going to get a win there, for us, it proved to be not effective. And I think we've had a lot more success just having real full cycle AEs doing a very focused account-based motion. So that's something that we definitely pivoted over the years.
I'm actually, both of you have talked a little bit about culture, both on this topic, but others, and the way that some people describe finance just in general, but you can definitely say this is true about fintech, is that, you guys operate in a high trust, kind of a high risk space, given what you guys do with dealing with money and what have you. So I'm curious, and I think this goes to kind of Joe's example, but how do you create a culture that's comfortable taking a little bit more of this calculated risk? Like you said, the playbook just doesn't work for you guys, or the way that you guys need to kind of go to market and talk to customers. So how do you create that culture that, that's comfortable taking these calculated risks while kind of staying kind of true to purpose and, really kind of what you guys are trying to achieve?
I think the team looks to the leadership group in terms of how are they doing things? Are they wanting to take on those calculated risks? Are they remaining steadfast with the ultimate vision? I think it's really important to consistently repeat to our team members that we're in the business of, there's no finish line, right, to what we're trying to build. And it's hard, right? Because sometimes you feel like you do a build and then you're done. But there's always other things that you discover in that feedback loop that make just building a business and technology so special, because the customers are always giving you these nuggets of information. It's truly gold, right? They're giving you what they see out there, and how do we use those nuggets and actually help inform how our product roadmap and ultimately our long-term strategic vision, right? One of the constant interactions that we have is how are we balancing building new things, but at the same time resiliency, liability, scale, infrastructure that allowed us and our partners to grow with us, right? We're in a business that requires tremendous precision. We can't go down. Payments is very, very personal to the businesses and the people making those payments, right? So we've got to always invest in having a very, very strong, reliable platform. But if we do want to be the AWS of payments, which is what we talk about a lot, there's so much to build, right? There's so much orchestration that we need to continue to stitch together, because there's a lot of fragmented solutions out there. And removing all of that is where every time we remove a fragmented solution out there and we consolidate that onto our stack, we get closer and closer to our long-term vision. But it's not easy, right? It's a very difficult challenge because of your one final thing I'll say is we love the idea of compounding startups. How do we have, like, if you think about our pay in, pay out, pay ops team, we also have a platform team. We don't market that as such, but how are each one of those teams, right, operating their business, if you will. It's a compounding startup, and there's an innovation that has to be had there while we build out the resiliency and the scale needs, so that we're always much ahead of what our customer demands are.
If we start to look into the future, then if we start to think about kind of, where Payabli is going, where do you see the company evolving into over the next 2 to 3 years? Are there like certain product areas that you guys are thinking about, new industries, your geographies, and so on? I mean, what's next for Payabli over the next?
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk product wise? I could talk kind of on the business side where we're going.
Yeah, for us is expanding the different payment modalities that we offer on pay in, pay out, expanding our wallets, expanding the different pay methods that are out there, right? We are expanding or adding more features to our payment operations. On top of that, like, in other words, consistently investing in our embedded component suite, that's a big part of what we do and what we offer. We have infused AI in many of our products and continuing to make those investments. That's a very, very exciting team. We have a dedicated team just to AI, and they're creating various models that are being infused by various teams, for example, in risk or in underwriting. So that's a very exciting area of investment for us, and it has been, right, for some time, but it continues to be a bigger part of our R&D. We're very excited about also being able to support our partners in different geos. So I think that's the next frontier for us. How do we do what we've been doing in the US, but be able to have that global presence and localized presence that is super, super exciting, right? Especially when it comes to pay-ins and payouts, right? If you think about it, right, you've got these SaaS platforms that are wanting to expand into different geos, and how do they continue to leverage Payabli not only in the US but in Brazil or in Mexico or in the UK. And so, and we get this use case on the payout. You've got a US based merchant or SaaS platform, and their merchant wants to make a payable or vendor payment to an international country. So how do we facilitate that payout in an easy way where they don't have to go out and do a wire outside of our ecosystem or use some sort of third-party application to do that? They could all do that within our suite of solutions. So those are the big areas of focus that our team very excited about.
Yeah, I think more on kind of just the organization, the business. To add to Will's point about AI, like, we're really excited about what the future prospects hold for AI, and we brought in a full-time role called our AI product strategist. So this person's whole role is to think about AI at Payabli. On one front is commercialization aspects. So like, how can we infuse in our product to drive more value for our partners and generate more revenue? And then also internally, how do we create operational efficiencies? So she's basically embedding herself with each of our teams, whether it's sales, success, ops, underwriting and risk, engineering and product, and helping them determine their AI playbook at Payabli. So we're really excited about that. We don't want to build a massive headcount organization, right? Right now we're about 100 and change team members. We'd like to keep that below, 300 to 500 team members, even at venture scale, right? We're processing today tens of billions of dollars of volume. We plan in the next couple of years to get to the hundreds of billions of dollars of volume. And we're really curious about how can we do that without having to throw bodies at that scale. So that's something that's really exciting for us as well.
The big question that companies big and small are all asking: how do they maintain and grow scale using AI or other kind of technology to enable them to do that? I'd like to just quickly shift gears and just ask, about, as co-founders, how do you divide responsibilities? How do you make difficult decisions about trade-offs, especially when these decisions can have maybe some financial risk implications and so on, given what you guys do at Payabli?
Yeah. I think, again, like, you connect the dots backwards, like Steve Jobs used to say. And I feel very blessed that Will and I crossed paths. I think a lot of the Payabli story is predicated on relationship. And I think we just complement each other extremely well as founders. That makes it very helpful and easy, right? Like when you have really strong co-founder fit, it's a lot easier to do it. I think generally Will manages kind of the product and engineering side of the house. I handle the customer operations, sales, success, all that stuff, right? But we coalesce quite a bit. I'm involved in product to the extent needed, where I'm championing the voice of the customer, and I'm making sure that things that we feel are warranted from a commercial standpoint, like the products that we think we can sell and will be value to the company, are being incorporated in the roadmap. And Will's involved in enterprise deals with me, and he's helping on setting the culture and involved in many HR decisions, right? So I think it's delegating to our strengths, but also being okay with letting the other person help inform those decisions. Generally, if there's a product or engineering decision that Will feels very strongly about, I'll say, hey, go for it, right? And I'll trust that he knows what to do in that case, and I'll be more of a sounding board for him. And I think he does the same thing for me on the other side of the house.
One of my favorite quotes is from Ben Horowitz, when he says, one of the hardest things of being a CEO or a leader is psychology, your own psychology. So I'd love to ask both of you, each of you, what are some habits or routines to help you kind of stay focused and kind of in kind of where you need to be for your team and for each other? I'm just kind of curious. Anything come to mind?
I got a few personal things that I do that
Yeah.
I try to instill in my kids and kind of just my general model of living, right? But number one is you have to have a strong why statement. Like, why are you waking up every day and sacrificing so much? When I talk to other entrepreneurs or team members, I really challenge them, like, make sure that you have a deep, deep why statement and connect that to the company's why statement. If you can't do that, then encourage you not to embark on this journey, right? Because when things get very, very tough, if you don't have that profound why statement as to why you're embarking on this, you give up easily, right? But that's core one for me personally, having a deep why statement. And one of the things that we talk about a lot at the company is having relentless curiosity, asking a ton of questions, which ultimately leads to mastery of the business that you're in and the industry that we're in, which is very, very complex. And when you achieve that mastery, you start to look around the corner. That then helps you. It's a formula for innovation, right? Because that mastery allows you to start looking around the corner, you start becoming an innovator and a contributor to the future. And then if you do that, now you become mission driven, and the hard work, the long hours in the lab, if you will, you don't feel it, right? So like asking a lot of questions leads to mastery, which leads to learning the business that you're in, and innovation. And then that innovation, constantly building and wanting to build, you're so excited about constructing something with your buddies and your friends, right? You become mission driven, right? And I think it's incredibly important to hold on to those things, right? Not only as a professional, but as an individual. And I tell that to my kids, like, are you asking a lot of questions? Are you really thinking about what you want to do and and be thoughtful about it, right? Like, become a master of whatever you're trying to uh, dedicate your life to. I think you start taking more control over your life, and hopefully it's a better way to live too.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. How about you, Joe? Any habits or routines that help you to maintain focus, or dare I say even sanity for some?
Yeah. I wish I had like the cool like founder morning routine that just made it. I mean, I think physical fitness is big for me, right? Like exercising in the morning. I'm an early riser and I try and get my fitness in. I do think the good thing about entrepreneurship is you build tough, thick skin and resiliency. So like after a while of taking on the chin, you kind of get used to it, and you know not to obsess on where you screw up, and you actually kind of relish it. I think most founders, we talk to them, they'll be like, we talk about this oftentimes, Will and I, like when it's all said and done, we have this kind of analogy of like sitting around the campfire when, we're a massive organization or we've sold or whatever it may be, 15 years down the line, and we get the group together, we're going to be thinking about the hard times and reminiscing on those. Is like, remember when that happened? I can't believe that happened. And there's already a million of them, and there's going to be a million more to come. I do think the other thing is, for me personally, and I know I think I can speak for Will on this behalf, we both have young kids, and having a kid, like has been such a good thing from a perspective standpoint for me was like, don't sweat the small stuff. Like roadblocks and challenges are going to happen, but like it's in the grand scheme of things, like these are surmountable issues. And one thing I'll do if I'm having a bad day is I'll take a break. I'll go play with my kiddo. I'm lucky I work from home, although I am traveling quite a bit. If I'm home and I'm having a bad day, I'll go take a walk with my family. I'll go play with my kiddo, and like immediate like shift in my mindset, right? So it is a marathon. It's all about perseverance. But yeah, I wish I could had like the perfect playbook for you, but that's pretty much what I do.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
If I could just add one more, I think it's really important to be really present with the blessings that we have, right? I think Joe and I, we're very fortunate, right? We've had great careers. We've had really interesting opportunities in our lives, and we try to communicate this to our team that what's going on at Payabli is an incredible opportunity. It's a huge blessing. It's a once in a lifetime situation where we have to take advantage of it, right? And these things just don't. You could get sucked into how this is like. It's so common, right? And it really isn't. To be backed by some of the best investors in the world, to be able to build really, really cool things that allow us to be those pioneers of the future and how value gets exchanged throughout the world is not only a blessing but a huge responsibility that we have to do good by, right? And so reminding yourself about that, I think, is also keeps you grounded.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I really love this idea of perspective and as well as appreciation. I have a ton of questions, but I'm going to end with just one last question for both of you. And this is a question that I'd love to ask everyone who joins us on for an interview and on this episode. But what is one action that our listeners who are founders, product leaders, that are ecosystem builders, what is one lesson that listeners can take this week to move the needle in how they think about building their own companies or their own ventures? Is there any one kind of action item that you care to share?
Yeah, I'll start, Will. Go out and sell a customer. Like you don't have to leave your business. You don't have to go full throttle. Like, just go and talk to a customer and get them to try and sell them. I think reflecting on my journey, there's been a lot of times where it's been a challenge. Whatnot. The hardest thing was leaving my comfortable head of sales, BD role, and ultimately like throwing caution to the wind and starting this business. But once you get started and you commit to it, you stick with it, things will, it's not guaranteed, but hopefully work out, right? And I think a lot of people kind of just fluctuate on, they're waiting for the right time, and there's never a right time, frankly, right? Just go out, try and get a customer. You don't have to quit your job to start your business. And that would be my recommendation.
I love that. Well, one last piece nugget of advice, one action item.
For folks wanting us to be an entrepreneur and get started, I always say, just jump in. Just jump in the water. Don't ponder too much. Just get started. Build your website, put pen and paper on your idea, and get started. Once you get that train started, it's such an exciting thing to do. If you already started and things that I love to share is ruthless execution does not necessarily, in our opinion, mean you have to have ruthless, cutthroat culture. For us, ruthless execution could come with a lot of kindness, right? And developing people is a lot harder than just simply letting go and firing people. I think if we develop people for the long term, you create this incredible, loyal group of individuals that know that you're going to be there and stick by them through thick and thin. And that, I think, is really rare, especially in the environments that we are as venture-backed organizations. It's a good way to live as well, right? Culture really, really matters when it comes to those situations, right? Dealing with people and people have their lives and they've got their unique situations, and it's our responsibility as leaders to understand that. And I think there's a big opportunity to be kind, even though you want to have ruthless execution.
Well, listen, those are both great action items to take. And really, I just want to thank both of you for joining us on this episode. Again, thank you. And really, for all our listeners, we're super excited to have Joe and Will from Payabli. And until next time, we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ed.